injustice issues. One of those players plays for the Lakers. It's guard and co-leader of a players coalition, Avery Bradley. He had this to say: regardless of how much media coverage will be received, talking and raising awareness about social injustice isn't enough. Are we that self-centered to believe no one in the world is aware of racism right now, that as athletes we solve the real issues by using our platforms to speak? We don't need to say more. We need to find a way to achieve more. Protesting during an anthem, wearing T-shirts, it's great, but we need to see real actions being put into the works. And in a memo to teams, NBA Commissioner Adam Silver released this statement: a central goal of our season restart will be to utilize the NBA's platform to bring attention and sustained action to issues of social injustice, including combating systemic racism, expanding educational and economic opportunities across the Black community, enacting meaningful police and criminal justice reform, and promoting greater civic engagement. We are in discussions with the Players Association to develop a comprehensive strategy on how the NBA, its teams, and players can best address these important social issues and uniquely position our league to drive action and create meaningful and generational change. So, Broussard, as Avery Bradley said, we don't need to see more. We need to find a way to achieve more. And it appears as if the league is listening. What do you make of what Avery Bradley and the commissioner had to say?
Well, I think everyone that criticized Kyrie Irving, Avery Bradley, Dwight Howard, and other players that brought up the notion of sitting out and forcing, the Black Lives Matter movement to the forefront of the league, I think they owe them an apology. Guys called it stupid and other things. They owe these guys an apology, because before they even brought up that notion, Avery and Kyrie, I had not heard the NBA say anything about addressing systemic racism. All I heard was coming back to play, COVID-19, the bubble, and that they would let players protest. And I don't like that term when it comes to a protest anyway, because a protest isn't about anyone letting you do something. It's about you making people uncomfortable. And so I think that Kyrie and Avery Bradley have forced the league to address these things. Now, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe behind the scenes, they were already talking with the Players Association about stuff like this, but I didn't see it publicly. And the fact of the matter is this: whatever the players were going to do or could do or will do in Orlando, as far as wearing T-shirts, kneeling down, locking arms during the anthem, whatever it was, the whole purpose of that is to get the powers that be in the system to address the system and address changes that need to be made. There's two ways to change a system: either tear it down completely or get the powers that be, the power brokers in the system, to start making changes. And now it appears that Avery and Kyrie have pushed the league to at least start looking at that. I love these phrases: combating systemic racism, that I heard from Adam Silver, expanding educational and economic opportunities across the Black community, create meaningful and generational change. That is what needs to be done. Now, this is only a first step. This is only a statement. It remains to be seen what exactly the league could do. But with Adam Silver and the owners, they can get a lot done that the players can't. So props to Avery and Kyrie for pushing this forward, Wilds.
Broussard, I totally agree. I think those were perfect points, that when they first came out, it was a little bit of like, what's going on here? And now you're looking at, they've already moved the conversation pretty far. So I think you're spot on. I also want to talk about Avery Bradley, and he was saying it's not enough for awareness. There's also a tremendous fundraising opportunity Avery Bradley has here, and I think that should also be part of the plan. And the reason why I say there's a tremendous fundraising opportunity for maybe hundreds of millions of dollars is that we just saw the NFL do it during the NFL draft. If we could put up the tweet, Roger Goodell, this was all in 3 days. Thank you for participating in Draftathon. With the addition of your donations, the NFL family has now collectively raised more than $100 million for COVID-19 relief. And they distributed that money to groups like the Salvation Army, American Red Cross, and the United Way. So if Avery Bradley was to identify some civil groups that shared a like-minded goals of combating systemic racism, in addition to some of the NBA-centric goals that they've outlined, I think they could raise hundreds of millions of dollars. And here's the strategy that I would employ, Nick. It would be an inside, outside of the game strategy. So we'll start with or inside and around. Around the game strategy is largely commercials, right? There's 4 pots of commercials during the playoffs and the NBA Finals. There's your national commercials that big sponsors like Nike gets. There's your local commercial that is given to NBA affiliates. There's promotional time, and there's institutional time, which the NBA controls that commercial inventory. That's where you see a lot of NBA cares. If I was Avery Bradley, I would say, hey, all that institutional time that NBA and the promos, I say, let's turn that into a call to action, a fundraising call to action to try to raise money, maybe for a central pot that would then be distributed. Maybe it flows through NBA Cares since that's already been logistically set up. The other thing is actual in-game call to action. These could be LEDs, on-court, broadcast calls to actions that when graphics pop up, jersey patches we know cost at least $20 million. The Warriors, Rakuten paid the Warriors $60 million over 3 years. If that was a call to action, those are very simple things that are to activate a few graphics, some jersey patches, some signage that could net hundreds of millions of dollars for organizations that Avery Bradley, I think, share the goal of Avery Bradley and Kyrie's group.
So I think that's a wonderful point, Wildes. And if the audience doesn't know, Wildes in his previous life worked hand in glove with the NBA, produced the NBA Finals. And so things like the 4 different pots of commercials, I guess I'd watched them my whole life, but I had never seen them in that regard. And knowing what the NBA allocates, if you kind of took some of the time from NBA Cares and put it to a different cause, I think could be super effective. But here to me is the most important part of this. We always hear about raising awareness. Raising awareness is useful, but it is only as useful as if that awareness then leads to action. And I think Avery nailed it when he said, at this point, folks are aware of the issue. Unlike 4 years ago when Cap was kneeling and folks wanted to deny the issue, we now have a majority of Americans that recognize not only systemic racism, but the specific issue of the moment, police brutality and the policing of minority communities is a major issue. So what can we do with that? So I have some very specific suggestions that I think the NBA could implement, some instantly and some moving forward. One would be this. Since this movement is about policing and police reform, I think you could have all 30 NBA teams say, listen, we have cops at our games. It is, when I've spoken to local police, it is a great gig. You get to go to the games. Very often you get extra overtime money. If your local police force does not implement these specific reforms, we're going to bring in our own private security. That extra time, those gigs are going to go away unless we see some changes within your local police force. Now, that might be more symbolic than anything, but I think it would be important. And then there could be real community investment. And Broussard, I know you remember, Wildes, Jenna, everyone remembers in the 90s, there was at one point in time a bipartisan support of Night Hoops, a successful inner city night, not only basketball, it's called Night Hoops, but program for young people who didn't have anywhere to go, that somehow, even though George H.W. Bush was one of the big supporters of it, and then Clinton was one of the big supporters of it, by the year 2000, it had become totally polarized and it went away. The NBA could fund that and help bring that back. There are other things as far as in the inner city communities that I think a lot of folks just don't even recognize, which is there are these food deserts where there just isn't a grocery store within walking or bus distance for people that live in this community. NBA owners have money to affect that type of change. If we want to stay on the criminal justice things, more direct help for folks who got caught up in the criminal justice system, in job training or rehabilitation to get them back into the workforce. And we know, Broussard, that it can work, and we know they have the money. All you have to do is think about what LeBron James has done for the young people of Akron. Every single NBA owner has more money than LeBron. And if you got 5, 10, 15 of the owners to make the type of investment in their local community that LeBron has made in Akron, then you would have real possibility for change, not to end systemic racism. I think that is going to be a multi-decade, maybe multi-century goal for this country that has a tortured history in that. But in making people's lives on a day-to-day basis better, lives that are brothers, sisters, aunts, cousins, mothers, fathers of our NBA superstars, that's what I think can be the ball can roll towards here, Broussard. And I think that is where the NBA's got to take a leadership role.
No, those are all good ideas, Nick. I remember midnight basketball. I used to participate. I spoke at some of those events, which you were talking about, night hoops. And it was very good, and it did just kind of fade away. So it'd be nice to bring that back. But you're absolutely right. I've always been a proponent of African-American athletes using their wealth, their connections, their influence to help the African-American community. And I've pushed the athletes to really do it. But because I didn't feel like the system was going to really do it. Now we're at a place, though, with the protests and things where people are really calling on the system to do some things for African Americans. And that's where the owners have to get involved. And that's what I like seeing so far with the NBA. Again, it's just a statement. Let's see what type of actions they come up with. But this is certainly a positive step in the next direction.
Couldn't agree more, Broussard. And I want to cap the conversation with another interesting point that Avery Bradley made, who said,